Greetings and welcome to a lecture on HTML. Now, if it's a lecture on HTML, why do I have a page up that says XML? Well, let's have a little bit of a history lesson before we move on to actually talking about HTML tags and some basics on how you set up a web page. So early on in the internet's formation, it was realized that there needed to be some sort of a standard for helping transfer data between wildly different systems. You got to keep in mind how data is stored on a Windows-based machine versus how data is stored on a Linux-based machine versus how it's stored on an Apple-based machine can be significantly different. And so there needs to be some sort of way of getting this data between systems. And it had to be lightweight. We're talking back in the era in which your bandwidth bill, if you are an ISP or someone heavily using the internet, your bill would have been measured in megabytes used. Not even gigabytes, just megabytes used. So the standard needed to be very lightweight. And one of the things that eventually came up was XML. It is text-based. As you can see here, it looks awfully similar to HTML. And what you do is you have what's called a schema file that defines how this data is structured. And then you can just write out your data in this marked up language. You use the schema to validate that you did it correctly, and now anybody else who also has this schema can receive this text data and bring it into their systems. So it was a very efficient system in the early days of the internet for moving data around. It's not used quite as much anymore, just due to the speed and the volume of which we can transmit things now. But back in the day, this was very, very common. Enter HTML. HTML is basically a specialization of the XML format. You can really see that. If you compare this little XML snippet right here to this little HTML snippet here, you can see that HTML is basically XML. It is the same document format. Now, unlike most XML formats, HTML is very forgiving. It is almost impossible to so badly format an HTML document that a web browser cannot render something. About the only time you really get to that point is when you start mixing JavaScript into the mix, and that's when the page can completely break. But if you're talking about just straight up raw HTML, it's very forgiving. You can misspell tags, leave them out, put completely made up tags in, and while it might not look good, it will still render most of the information. All right. So what exactly is the format of an HTML page? Well, first and foremost, we have these things called tags. So HTML, body, this /h1, these are all tags. Now, most tags have an opening and a closing tag. So we have HTML, and then we have a closing HTML tag, which is basically a /, and then that tag. So opening HTML tag, closing HTML tag, opening body tag, close body tag, so on and so forth. There are some tags, like the image tag or the SRC tag, that do not have a closing tag because all of the information contained within that tag needs to operate is contained within the tag itself. It doesn't need the data in between. About the only real, super hard, fast rule that you never want to violate when it comes to tags is you want to nest tags, not overlap tags. These tags are all nested. I open HTML, I close HTML, and everything else is contained inside of there. So we've got the body tag, the closing body tag, and then all those other tags are contained within there. And I'll show examples of overlapping tags once we open up Visual Studio Code. But this is nesting. The tags don't overlap. There is no, I don't have the body tag here and then the closed body tag here, which would cause an overlap. They're all nested. That's like one of the really hard, fast rules of HTML development is we want to nest our tags. As far as bare minimum tags go, while you should always have a doc type tag, it's not required. You will actually encounter quite a few web pages out there that will not, in fact, have a doc type tag at the top. But it is properly formatted HTML to have this little doc type tag at the very, very top of your program or your page to identify that, hey, this document is an HTML document. The first tag that you will always have open is going to be an HTML tag, which means the last tag that will be closed will always be an HTML tag. Finally, anything that's going to be the actual content of the web page needs to be inside a body tag. We'll deal with the header tag and titles and such a little bit later. But for now, know that, HTML is the first tag you should always have after your doc type. And then all of your content should go inside body tags. So let's actually get writing some HTML code, because that's a bit more interesting than just listening to me talk about it. And also cover how is it that you're supposed to get the files and such for your assignments. So when you go to GitHub, there'll be the files for link, usually for assignments, that'll have a link to a GitHub Classroom. Follow that link, accept the Classroom, and then you are going to have to clone it using GitHub Desktop. So I'm going to come over here to GitHub Desktop. I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Clone Repository. Now, you will probably have a reasonable number of repositories here. I do not. But if you can find your repository in this chaotic list, then you can go ahead and select it and clone. It can also be a good idea that when you accept the classroom assignment, it's going to show you a HTTPS web link. You can copy that and paste it in here to also clone the repository. When you go to clone a repository, you do need to make sure that it's cloning to an empty directory. You cannot have a single file in this directory or it will fail. As an example, if I take out that portion of my path, it's now yelling at me that Git can only clone to empty folders, and the clone option is no longer available. This generally shouldn't be an issue unless you're trying to, for some reason, re-clone the assignment, in which case you need to make sure that you've deleted out the prior version before you try to clone it. Doesn't matter where you clone this, by the way. Just make sure you know where it's cloned so you can find it. You will sometimes get this message. You may trust the repository. It is safe. And there is a message you might also get that I never get because I'm the owner of the repositories, is it might prompt you to say, how do you want to use this repository? And in that case, you always want to choose personal use, which should be the bottom option. Once we get to this point, we can open in Visual Studio Code. That should automatically open up the folder. Now, in this particular case for the HTML basics, there's going to be no files. This is expected. There are no files this time around. Most of the time, there will be files for you to work out of. All right, let's get a web page created. So I'm going to click on New File, or you can also go to File, New File, or inside the Explorer area here, you can right-click New File. Lots of options. And we want to call this index.html. Index.html is a very special file when it comes to web page development. When you open up a website and you don't specify a file, it is going to look for either an index.htm or an index.html file. And if it finds one, it will automatically load and display that file. So that is why we will always be starting things with an index.html. Now, we need to get the various parts of an HTML file put in here. So first and foremost, I'm going to put in my doc type. Do not be afraid, by the way, of using the autocomplete to your benefit. So it's immediately suggesting to me that I do a doc type here, so I am going to hit enter, and it just automatically fills it in for me. Next up, I need an HTML tag. And notice that after I put in the opening HTML tag, it will automatically put in the closing HTML tag. Now, we're also going to want to put a title on this. Now, titles go into what is called the head tag. And it's going to look like this. So we've got an opening HTML, an opening head tag, an opening title, and then what the actual title is going to be. Next up, we're going to need a bar body tag. And I'm just going to put the word content here for the moment, just so that we can see that, yes, this is working as intended. And that's it. We got a web page. It's about as basic as you can get, but we have a web page. Now, before we actually take a look at this, I want to address that nesting versus overlapped. Again, this is all nested. A opening tag. Again, let's see what's the best way to, I guess the best way to describe this is to show what a overlapped tag would be. Putting in some extra spaces here. This would be an example of an overlap tag. I have an opening head, an opening title, a close head, and a close title. That is not okay. The last tag, the most recently tagged that was opened, should be the next tag that is closed. So I open head, so you can open as many as you want in a nested chain, but you have to close them out in the same order. So I open HTML, open head, I open title, but then I'm closing head. That's not okay. I haven't closed title yet. I need to make sure I close the head tag. Also, you will notice now, upon doing all that jumping around, my indentation is shot. I'm going to fix it, but I also want to prove to you that it doesn't matter. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And in order to view our web page, what we're going to want to do is right-click on our file, and we're going to say Open with Live Server. And this will automatically open up your default web browser and show you the page using a little internal web server so we can actually see it running. And sure enough, the greatest page ever, there's my title, and there's my word content. Notice there's no line break in the title. Not that it would make any sense to have a line break up here. And everything's rendering just fine. White space, generally speaking, is ignored in HTML documents. For example, if we go in here and I hit the enter key and I put in next line. So line 10 says content, line 11 says next line. If I save that and then flip back over to my web browser, which will automatically update it. Yeah, no, that's not on the next line, is it? Generally speaking, white space, especially new line codes or extra spaces even, will be ignored. Only one space will be recognized, and then after that, HTML is going to ignore it. Again, just one space. And also, the indentation does not matter. If I take this and flatten everything to the edge like that, my page will still work. Nothing's changed. Still works just fine. Hit refresh just to make sure. Yep, okay, yeah, nothing's changed. So, you don't want to do this, however. Like, if you come to your instructor for help and your HTML looks like this, one of the first things your instructors is probably going to do is say, okay, fix your indentation. So every time you have an open tag, you should indent the next set of tags by one level. So I indent head like that, indent title like that. I'm going to go ahead and fix that nonsense. White space. Like so. Again, does this matter as far as the rendering of your web page goes? No. This doesn't matter at all. But it makes it a lot easier to read when you have it like this. It also makes it easier to find mistakes when you've either not put in a tag or you've accidentally overlapped tags. Having your HTML properly indented like this just makes it a lot easier to read and a lot easier to find errors. So make sure that you are doing this. Okay, let's take a look at some very common tags. First and foremost, the BR tag, short for break or line break. The BR tag is what you need to use in order to kick something down to the next line. So now that I've put in a BR tag there, I come over here and I look at the web page. Yep, okay. Web page is, or the next line is in fact on the next line now. Hooray. Another tag that you will very frequently use is the paragraph tag. So let's just say you've got a paragraph of text that needs to be displayed. Well, you would use the P tag. And the advantage, oops, I've got a spare caret there. And the advantage here is that in the next set of paragraph tags, there will automatically be a space in between them. Now, here's where we come to an interesting sticking point for designing web pages. I know that I need a block of text here. Yeah, I'm writing up a product description page describing several products, and I know that I'm going to have some sort of copy here, but I haven't gotten it yet. What do? I can't just leave this blank because I won't be able to see that the layout looks good. Well, fortunately, there is a command called lorem. It's short for lorem ipsum. It's something printers developed for when they needed to check the layout of something, but they didn't have the text yet. Lorem ipsum is basically fake Latin that very closely mimics the words, the letter count and spacing and such of actual English words. So let's say I want 100 words of lorem ipsum. I can type in lorem 100, hit enter, and now I have 100 words of lorem ipsum. I'm going to do the same over here. This time, say, I'm just going to type in lorem. It does fewer words. So now I'm going to save my page. By the way, if you're not seeing changes when you flip over, it's probably because you forgot to hit save. And now I can see that, yep, okay, I've got a big old chunk of nonsense paragraph text here. And then in the next paragraph, a smaller chunk of nonsense text. So this can be a very good way of rapidly generating some text as placeholder. We don't care what it is. We just need to have some text there. What are some other things? Well, let's talk about header tags. For example, I might want to put a title on this page. I'm going to say product listing. Now, I could use just standard paragraphs. So actually, let me walk this back here for a moment. If I just use a standard paragraph tag here and flip over and look at this, it's like, okay, yeah, it says product listing, but it doesn't really stand out from the rest of the page, right? Well, we have a series of header tags that, well, they're used as section headers. So by default, H1 has this font size with bold applied to the text. I can get even fancier by then coming in after this first paragraph here and maybe saying H2, product 1. And then another H2, product 2. And put in another paragraph with some junk text in it. And then you can see the H levels. The H2 is smaller than the H1, still larger than standard text. And now I've got a more sensible layout of, here's my main title, product 1, product 2, so on and so forth. Now, the last thing that I want to show is linking to another web page. Which, by the way, this won't quite cover everything that you have to do on the assignment. Everything that you need for the assignment will be covered in the reading materials. But I will typically leave out a few minor details in the lectures, so that way you have to go and read up on how to do certain things. And the reason why I do this is because the skill that will serve you best is not perfect knowledge of how to do a thing, but rather the knowledge of how to look up what you don't know. This is especially true for programming. You can't know everything. There's too much and it changes too fast. You can't know everything. But what you need to know is when you run across something that you don't know, how do you look it up? So I'll cover most things, but there will always be a few minor things that I leave out. Okay, the last thing I want to cover in this lecture is how do we link to another page, because that is really important. All right, so what if for product 1 here, I wanted to link to a different web page? We're going to link to product 1. Well, first I have to have a web page to link to, right? I don't have another web page here. So I'm going to right click new file, or again, you can do file, new file. Here's a little new file button right there. Lots of different ways of doing this. I'm a right click kind of guy. And I'm going to do new file. I'm going to call this product.html. And I'm just going to put a single word in here as a placeholder, so that way I can see that, yes, I did successfully link to this file. Obviously, this is where you're going to do your assignment. So get rid of the meep. The meep's not part of the assignment. Okay, back over here on index, we need to get the actual anchor tag in. So again, we're going to do this on product 1. Now the anchor tag, of course, is just an opening and close on A, like so. So I have an opening A tag and a closing A tag. Now that by itself is obviously not going to do very much, right? We haven't given it enough information. In fact, if we save and switch over, nothing's happened. We need to tell it, well, what kind of anchor is this? Well, this is what's called an href tag for hypertext reference. Now, you can put in full HTTPS addresses here, which is how you would link to something outside of your website. But since this is an internal link, I can just say product.html. Now, if I save that and flip over, you will notice now that this has turned blue and has an underline. We'll be able to change that once we start getting into CSS, but for now, anytime you mark something as a hyperlink, as they're called, it's going to turn blue and get an underline. And if I click on it, yay, it takes me to product.html. Now there's no way to get back, at least until you complete your assignment. So I'm just going to hit the back arrow to go back one level. And that's pretty much it. Again, when I talk about properly formatted HTML documents, this is what I mean. You've got the doc type tag at the very top indicating that it's an HTML page. You have an HTML tag as your first tag, properly closed. You have a head tag, properly closed, a title tag, and a body tag. Everything properly closed, no overlaps. The last tag that was opened has to be the last tag that was closed. So body H1, I close H1, and then down here body is closed. That is the correct way to nest tags. Now, of course, your job for this page here is going to be to create a little fake product page. Follow the instructions on Blackboard in terms of what exactly needs to go in here, and you should be good. Now, once you have finished all of your changes, how you turn the assignment back into me is you are going to go back to GitHub Desktop, and it should show that you have changes. What you need to do is, for the summary, you're going to need to type in something here. It can be something as changes made, initial commit, whatever. I will see this, but I do not grade off of it. Do not, by the way, put any comments or any like critical information you think I need to know about this in the description. Because again, while I technically can see it, I probably won't. If you have like actual comments about the assignment that you need to pass on to me, make sure you do that back in Blackboard. So once you have your summary put in, you click on commit. Now it is not done. You have just committed to your local repository. You still need to publish. Now you should actually see push changes, not publish branch. Mine looks a little bit different because of how I checked this out. But you would click on this. And then once you see your screen like this, no local changes, there's nothing listed over here, no blue buttons, oh, except for that will always be there, then you're good. You've pushed your changes up. I should be able to see them. Make sure you go over to Blackboard and post on the assignment page, done, assignment complete, code pushed, whatever you want to put there to let me know, because I will not be notified of this push. You have to tell me over on Blackboard that the assignment is done and is ready for grading. If you run into any questions, please reach out to me immediately. It can be a little tricky sometimes getting used to using source control, but it goes pretty smoothly once you're used to it. And with that, that is all I have. Good luck on the assignment, and I'll catch you on the next one.